Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk about desires. And specifically, I want to get into how we respond to our desires and what's possible depending on how or where we respond from. So, first of all, let's just think about a desire. A desire is anything that emerges from within you that you have a good feeling about. Might be that you want to give someone a call. It could be that you want to change jobs. It could be that you want to skydive. Who knows what it might be? But it's something that shows up in the moment and you have a good feeling about it. The question is, what do we do from there? Are we actors or are we thinkers on our desires? Because when a desire shows up, it inevitably shows up with an action, something that we could do, a first step. And when we're living in the moment and we take action, take that first step, we get an outcome. Something shifts in our world. Now, it might be the thing that we want or it might not. We don't really know what's going to happen as a result of our outcome. But what we do know is that there is impact. And depending on what that impact is, that creates the insight and the possibility for the next action. Because when we are being present and when we're acting on our desires, I want you to think about it as though you're coming from an open hand, in the same way as we have an open mind. We're open-minded about the possibility that sits on the other side of this desire, and in order to see what that is, we take action. And for the most part, when this is happening, we're not really thinking about it, but what's really cool is that when we do it, this is what is the catalyst for what people call the flow state. It's where we're just moving from one action to the next. We're in flow. It's a tight cycle of action, outcome, impact, more action, and we're totally immersed in our desire and we're totally present to what's alive for us. Now, this is a feeling that most of us want to chase down, and it's things that we're in search of. But what I want us to really see is that you can't really find flow. You fall into flow. Flow is what happens as a result of us acting on our desires in the moment. It's what happens when we engage in what we're interested in that moment, and we go with it fully without getting too caught up in any of our thoughts or kind of alternative ideas. We just kind of really settle into it. So let's take a look at what can get in the way of that. So in the same way, a desire might show up and we can see the action. We have a sense of an action we can take, but we don't take it. And so what happens instead is that we think about it and we start thinking about, well, what might be the outcome if I was to follow this desire? And then we start to evaluate. We evaluate, well, is that going to be worth it? We evaluate the likelihood of it happening, the likelihood of it meeting our needs, and we kind of get into this circular action. And as we do, I want you to think about it like we go from an open hand where we're being open-minded to we go and become closed-minded. We start to tighten up about the action. You can almost feel yourself getting tense. Now, what's really important to note here is that now we're not acting on our desires. We're not actually in the world. At this point, we're in our heads. And this leads us to a very different place. This can lead us to a place where we start to judge ourselves. And as we judge ourselves, we fall lower and lower into a low mood. And then we start to make this mean something about who we are. We lose sight of the fact that we've just simply had a misstep, that we've gotten lost in our thinking about our desires versus just trusting the desire itself and acting on it. But when we're down here, it looks very real. And so often we lose sight of the desire entirely and we become immersed in our thinking about ourselves, and we get very down on ourselves. And you can see how this shifts us away from the place that we would love to be and kind of sets us off entirely in the wrong direction. So I imagine you're asking, well, if we're here, how do we get back to the other place? Like what's the key to finding flow versus finding judgment? Well, what's really cool to know is that we don't have to be in either for very long. And when we notice that we're in this place, which we will, because, once we become aware of something, that's a really cool thing. Like, our awareness is always on our side. The question is, can we notice that we're in a low mood? Can we feel ourselves tightening up and recognize, oh, this is happening because I'm going into the basement of my thinking about this. I'm getting caught up in the idea that I've got to figure this all out in my head. If we can notice that, then with the opportunity to get out of it. But a bit like Albert Einstein says, the level of thinking that created the problem can't be the level of thinking that will solve for that problem. So we have to shift back to an alternative place. So rather than thinking, how do I get out of this? The question might be, what was the desire that I was connected to in the first place? What is it that I would love, which has nothing to do with getting away from judgment or getting away from a low mood? It's coming back to that place and thinking, given everything I know, given where I'm at, what is it that I would love? What is alive in me right now? And when we do that, we're using our inbuilt system, our innate system that is there to guide us back to the path, bring us back online. And as we do that, we reconnect again with an action, a step that we can take. Now, the opportunity is, again, at that point, it's like, do we take the action or do we go back to thinking? But if we take the action, then we kickstart the flow process, because now we're back in the world. Things are happening. We are the catalyst for our world changing, and we start to respond to that, and we're back in play, and often then we are back in flow. So what I would love for you to start thinking about or looking at this, and all of this really is a frame of reference. I'm probably not telling you anything that you don't really know, but what I hope I'm doing is amplifying it for you so that you have a really clear frame of reference as to what one looks like over the other, knowing that we will find ourselves in both of these ways of being. We'll find ourselves in flow, and we can find ourselves in judgment. We can find ourselves as an open hand and a closed fist. And we're doing a dance between those things. When you're in flow, don't try and hold on to it, because as soon as you're doing that, you're one step from pulling yourself out of flow. When you find yourself in a low mood and in a cycle of judgment where perhaps you're procrastinating and not taking action on things, don't think that there's something wrong and that you have to stop that. Notice it, be okay with it, and again, come back to, hang on, what do I know, what would I love in this scenario? And listen for the action that emerges, and then step in that direction. And often that is going to bring you back up the elevator of your awareness. It's going to bring your mood up. It's going to shift your state of mind. So when we think about desires in really simple terms, I want you to think about these three things. Number one, can you be present to what's alive in you in the moment? 2, don't try and look for all of the actions or everything you have to figure out. Pay attention to the first step, to the next step. And 3, take that step, take the action, not because it has to lead anywhere or it has to turn out a certain way, but just because you know that by taking that step, you will see so much more. And as you see more steps will become apparent to you. And then you can take those and keep taking them for as long as you can and enjoy that process, knowing that if you fall off, you can just get back on, because the process stays the same, because you become a person who acts on their desires in the moment rather than falling into the thinking about them in your head.